Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're tuning in to our broadcast here. We want to welcome all of you to our webinar today, which is talking about AR and FR trends, the future of what's going on, current products, new products, anything that our distinguished panelists from these great companies who I'm so thankful have agreed to talk with us today have cooked up for us. There was definitely some interesting things being discussed in the pre-game show here. So I'm very excited for what everyone's going to talk about today. A quick word about the NAUMD. We are the North American Association of Uniform Manufacturers and Distributors, although we do reach far beyond the borders of North America. We produce a lot of news. We have an annual awards. If you aren't opted into our free Tuesday newsletter called The Pulse, please opt in at our website. We produce industry data for our members. And best of all is we help facilitate networking between manufacturers, their sales channels, dealers, distributors, certain key end users. But we're really a network-based organization. You can read more about us at naumd.com. So today I want to thank also Klopman International, who is helps us coordinate some of these international based webinars. They helped us with the 6x6 earlier in the year and helped us with this one today. So we're very thankful for our partner, Klopman International. We asked a series of questions to the panelists. What's happening? What does the future hold for AR and FR manufacturing and styles? For those of us not as technical, the styles are also, a consideration for the product moving through the marketplaces. And for the past 60 years, this was something Klopman's very interested in, the cotton treated, and then we went to Aramid and then to blends. And so it's kind of like, what's next? Is it cyclical? Are we going to return to certain things, or, what's new, what's going to be happening? Certainly the past 18 months have been a challenge in all kinds of ways. But what will be happening with the public safety markets? What are they going to be adopting more AR and FR and other first responders? And to what extent will the uniform specifications change? Maybe as a result of COVID, maybe as a result of of other items. But I'm very curious if FR is going to become part of the public safety market. And then at least one of our panelists is going to be talking about some updates in regulations, what's happening here in North America, certainly with regulations related to AR and FR. So with that, we're going to go in alphabetical order by company name. And then I will introduce each speaker. They'll talk for 5 to 10 minutes each. And then we will have plenty of time for questions and answers at the end. And you can use your chat or there is a Q&A. Either is okay to ask questions when the time comes. So with that, I'm going to introduce Arcware. And we have Brian Shields today, who is the line service manager at Arcware. And take it away, Brian.
All right, thank you very much, Rick, and thank you to NAUMD and Klopman for the opportunity to talk a little bit today. And had a good segue there, but as Arcware and Connectrix, we are a testing company, so that's what I'm going to talk about today. Is kind of some updates, recent updates to some standards and testing as it relates to both flash fire protective clothing and arc rated clothing. We'll start with flash fire. And so our primary standard there is NFPA 2112. And That's the standard on flame-resistant clothing for protection of industrial personnel against short-duration thermal exposures from fire. That's the relatively new term for flash fire, short-duration thermal exposure. And this isn't necessarily a recent update that I'm going to start with. This is the 2018 edition. It added some new items to the scope. Before that, it was just garments, protective garments. Now we have shrouds, hoods, balaclavas are part of that standard for face and neck protection. There are several products certified to that standard that are shrouds, hoods, balaclavas. And I think the reason there are several for that is because it's just all the standard testing. We omit the flash fire mannequin for those. But more the newer item that I wanted to talk about was that it also incorporates gloves. Hand protection is now an NFPA 2112. And to date, it took almost 3 years, but to date, there is only one product certified. We did the testing here at Arcware. Not a plug for the product, but it's the one you see pictured in the top picture. It's from Ironclad. And it, again, is the only product that's certified. We expect there will be more to follow now that there is one. But I think why it took a little longer to get gloves certified to NFPA 2112 is it requires a unique testing program to each specific product. That particular glove, I think it has about 8 different materials in it that all needed to be tested. It's not as simple as a garment certification, but hand protection is certainly important in industrial flash fire. So I'm glad to see it's in the standard. I'm glad to see products starting to be certified, and we do expect more to come along. Also, as Rick mentioned, some of these changes are in response to the global pandemic that we've all been dealing with for over a year and a half now. We also recently added a TIA to NFPA 2112 to add barrier face coverings to the scope. For anybody who doesn't know, a TIA is a temporary interim amendment. NFPA standards are typically updated only once every 5 years. So we couldn't wait to the 2023 edition to provide some guidance for flame resistant face coverings because employers out there are requiring their employees to wear them. And it only makes sense if they need flame resistant clothing, you may as well wear flame resistant face covering as well. So that's now in that scope. Another one that's added to the scope is Astm F1506. That's just a baseline FR labeling standard for incidental exposures to heat and flame. But we've also added barrier face coverings to that scope as well. So going back to NFPA 2112 and the incorporation of gloves, one issue particularly facing gloves is our HTP test. That's your insulation from heat and radiant heat and flame test. It requires a 6x6 square, and that was fine for the glove that we tested. But take a whole knitted glove, for instance, and you don't have a 6x6 square. So together with Thermetrics, and this development started when I was still with a previous employer, PBI Performance Products. So we've developed this test apparatus with Thermetrics that allows us to evaluate a whole glove to flash fire. The flash fire mannequin does not have sensors on the hands. And in the case of a whole knitted glove, for instance, you don't have a large enough piece to make a specimen for HTP. So this new test will allow us to, on a bench scale, allow us to do a flash fire exposure on a whole glove. And it's a censored hand it's got 3 sensors in the palm, 3 in the back of the palm, and 4 on the wrist and forearm. We're currently in development of an ASTM standard test method so that this can be incorporated into standards like NFPA 2112. NFPA 1971 may consider it as well as some of the international protective clothing standards that currently struggle to test gloves. So just a quick little video to show you what this looks like. Again, it's on a bench scale. A similar 84 kilowatt or 2 calorie per square centimeter second heat flux, a smaller fireball than the mannequin, a larger fireball than the HTP test, but it allows us to get burn injury prediction data, or we can do a energy ratio value, how much energy was in the total energy in the incident versus how much came through the protective clothing. In this case, this is that 12112 certified glove, just a couple small areas that predicted a second-degree burn, but overall very protective glove. So that's kind of what's happening in flash fire. Over in ARC ratings, there are a couple updates to the primary standards there. Astm F1506 was updated twice last year. Actually, the 20 edition incorporated some conformity assessment, so that still is a standard that only requires a manufacturer's self-declaration of conformity, but there's a little bit more guidelines in there now about for a lab like ours at Arcware to perform a conformity assessment, specific items that we're looking for there. So that's been some good guidance, both for us as a test lab, but for manufacturers as well. Again, like NFPA 2112 and ASTM F2302, we have added in the 20A edition of F1506, we've added language there around barrier face coverings to its scope as well. And then one other new item, it's a brand new standard, ASTM F3258. This is a new protector glove standard. So historically, and including the one shown in the picture here, historically protector gloves have been only leather. But now with this new specification for protectors, it allows non-leather protectors. So we hope to start seeing some textile-based protector gloves start to hit the market, just to give some more options to the industry. So I know we have several speakers today, so I'm going to turn it over to the next. And if anybody has any questions, I think what we're doing, Rick, and confirm this, I think we're just holding all the questions till the end. And I'll be here. I'll stick around for the other talks and look forward to answering some questions later.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you, Brian. That video is impressive and scary at the same time. But I'm really glad to see what's happening in the glove, in the glove world. It's kind of about time in a certain sense, right? So next up from Bulwark is Derek Sang. Derek, we're so pleased to have you here today. Derek is the technical training manager at the internationally recognized Bulwark. So Derek, take it away.
Rick, thank you very much. Thumbs up if you can see my screen. We're good. So getting on, when I was tasked with this, I just went instinctively with what popped into my mind as Rick kind of laid out those four questions. And one of the things that we started looking at as garment manufacturers are looking at purpose-built garments. Start looking at the marketplace and what the challenges are for our end users. And what we start looking at is not only do we work in a hazardous environment when we're in and around energized electrical equipment, or we're in chemical facilities or oil and gas exploration, or in our refining facilities, we have arc flash and flash fires hazards. We also have environmental stressors. So when Mother Nature becomes part of the hazard, can you build garments that are going to help protect folks? I mean, for example, we are 13, I think we're up 130 some odd % over the last 13 years in vector-borne diseases. When you start looking at mosquitoes and ticks, our folks are outside working and they have a much greater chance of running into Lyme disease and Zika and others from vectors like mosquitoes and ticks. Hopefully then what we're building the garments for arc flash and flash fire protection. So can you build in repellency? In hot environments, you're seeing, even though OSHA doesn't have a regulation per se right now, you're seeing a lot of state OSHAs taking over and putting in stringent controls because unfortunately deaths from heat and heat stress are constantly on the rise. And when you look at all the national weather services, you look at NASA, it's not going to get any better anytime in the near future. So can we build garments that mimic the cooling mechanisms within our garments? So that's one area that we are working on, is not just lighter, but build in moisture transfer from actual wicking and evaporating, so that it actually mimics how your body deals with heat and sweat, etc. So next into it, better transparency with our wearers, with our end users, getting beyond brochures and marketing terms. Sometimes we want to find that keyword or that silver bullet that's going to ultimately convince somebody that our fabric or our solution is better than everybody else, and we get caught up in terminology. So when you're looking at brochures, lighter does not mean more comfortable. Plastic bags are very, very light. Wouldn't make a garment out of them, definitely wouldn't wear one. Screen doors, a lot of air permeability, would not make a garment out of them. So it's got to be a balance. And remember, in the flame resistant arc rated world, our first goal and our utmost is we have to protect you. It does not matter what any of the technology is behind that. If I can't get to the arc rating that you need, or the flash fire protection that you need, it does not matter. So it's a very delicate balance in the protective apparel world. We are first and foremost have to protect you. Then we can start looking at wicking built into the system, air permeability, and ultimately weight as providing you the best balance for that garment at the end of the day. Terminology. We have been, in my opinion, we have been kind of stuck in this inherent and treated terminology for going on 40, almost 50 years. And it was probably relevant back in the 1980s and the 1990s when, yes, you had far fewer fabric solutions and you had solutions that were quote unquote treated, that did wear out, that were susceptible to laundering. And that was the case then. The case today with reputable supply chain partners looking at the various ways to get FR engineering, those terms are obsolete. And especially with all the blends now where we're blending aramids, we're blending cellulosics, we're blending FR monocrylics, and we're coming up with very sophisticated solutions, it's definitely obsolete. So we need to look at new terminology that better explains what we're doing so the end user can make an educated choice. And when you look at FR engineering, there is no such thing as inherently flame resistant. Man was involved in creating it, so it did not come in and of itself. So how can it be inherent? I took a nylon, which was a petrochem based product, and I turned it into Nomex. I take other engineerings at the molecular level and I create Kermel and I create Kevlar. Those are all human beings interfering. I take a modified acrylic and I put fire retardant chemistry in it when it's a soup and I extrude a fiber. Now I've got an FR monocrylic. That is not inherent. And then I take a cellulosic, which is fuel, and I apply and bond chemistry to it, which gives it FR engineering. So the point is, you have to have that solution when you need it, not just day one, day 1001, but the day that it has to be there, and it has to be durable. And that's really, at the end of the day, all that matters. So looking at being much more transparent in what we're trying to communicate to the end user, so why they can make the best decision for their people in their environment under their conditions. And as opposed to trying to push one term over top of the other to imply there is some difference or there's some extra safety it just doesn't show up at the end user level when we have incidents and we do forensics. Now, there is still bad FR out there. You still have to be conscious of where it's sourced and who you're sourcing it from. But that's easily done, much more so than trying to rifle through one brochure versus another brochure where you've got marketing departments trying to tell you where you need to focus on. Focus on the data, focus on the engineering, focus on the test results, and then verify those and make the best decision for you. First responders has been huge, as Rick alluded to. We're not going to talk about NFPA 1999 here for us because we currently don't do a lot of stuff in that barrier world. We don't do a lot of, where we're looking at putting FR properties into barriers that would come under NFPA 1999. But where we do work, for example, is in our firefighting community. When you look at station wear, right now, believe it or not, of the 400,000 firefighters out there, only 100,000 of them, or 1/4 of them, currently wear FR underneath their station wear. So what are the other 3 out of 4 wearing? Well, they're wearing everything and anything across the board. So what's that opportunity? The closest thing in that firefighter ensemble to the firefighter is their station wear. Do you not think that if my job title says firefighter, that I would have every single layer possible to have firefighting capabilities or fire insulative capabilities? Why would I remove that from what's closest to me? We see synthetics underneath turnout gear. We see blends underneath turnout gear. And the testing that we have done, we know that if we get to extreme conditions where we can make thermal energy pass through turnout gear, which is possible under flashover conditions, that base layer will be affected. You could technically be melting plastic onto firefighters under extreme conditions. Why would you do it? So we definitely want to move the education level in that community to 3 out of 4 firefighters to get away from meltables, get away from 6535s, get away from performance fabrics, get at least into 100% natural like cotton, and better yet, have an additional FR layer there to provide protection and insulation. Then lastly, as the planet heats up, and especially here in North America, the last firefighting season has lasted probably 6 to 8 months. Our firefighters who are on the front lines who do wildland urban interface, that means I'm a structural firefighter and I also have wildland focus. I'm getting out of that turnout gear, and what am I getting into? I'm getting into 1977 gear that you see pictured here. Can we make that more ergonomical? Can we provide some barrier protection into all the pollutants that they're up against? Can we provide dual certification where our pants are both 1975 for station wear and 1977 for wildland urban interface? And then we special design their outerwear so that they're not burdened with trying to wear turnout gear, or worse yet, removing their turnout gear and exposing non-FR to fight a brush fire, or now to where we see these intensive fires as they roll through. So with that, my wish list, when we look at consistency in terms, remember, garments are flame resistant, but they're not fire retardant, they're not flame retardant, they're not fireproof. I would just like to see the marketplace as a whole do better in their communication, that we do understand what we're telling our end users. NFPA 2112 compliant garments are not flash fire rated. They are not fire rated. That term does not exist. We have ARC rated in our electrical community. We do not have flash fire rated currently in our 2112 compliant community. Because why? They're not just talking about flash fires. They're talking about other short duration thermal exposures from fire. So that's what it speaks to. Crazy marketing terms that have come out like self-extinguishing. What does that even mean? Well, that's reference to passing a simplified test that's not a performance test. The fact that you can't meet the ANSI 107 standards for FR, you cannot create your own subcategory, because that's going to confuse those who ultimately have to wear it to protect themselves. So let's get away from that. Let's do better. And then a clearer understanding of what the hazard is, I think, would help the end users get around with we're not protecting against arc flashes and flash fires. What are we protecting against is clothing ignition. Arc flashes and flash fires ultimately do not end up in fatality because, one, they typically don't last long enough. Two, they're not going to damage enough of you if you don't have clothing ignition. So what's the real hazard that we're protecting against as a marketplace is clothing ignition. And if we can better communicate what the hazard is and talk to the actual hazard, I think people can understand that catching fire is not a good thing and we should probably prevent it. So with that, hopefully I'm within my 10-minute window, Rick. I'm going to turn it back over to next up.
Nice. Wow, that was great. You fit a lot in there, Derek, very quickly, and we appreciate that. That terms thing that's a biggie, man. That is a biggie. Next up is Richard Lippert from Glengard. Thrilled to have Glengard with us here. And Rich is the Vice President of Technical Sales. And Rich, we will have you take it away. I'm going to share your screens. And Rich, can you hear us? You there, Rich? Rich was having trouble. We will give it about 10 more seconds. Rich, can you hear us?
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes, we can. Okay.
Excellent. All right.
All right. So let me share my screen for you here, Rich. Share that. Okay.
Good deal. Rick, thank you, and thank the NAUMD for having us today. And greetings, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're at. I am reaching you guys from Louisville, Kentucky. I'm at the Utility Expo show. So the purpose of today's discussion is very timely from a number of standpoints. One, I've enjoyed the last couple of days here in Louisville, speaking to end users, communicating with potential customers, and just talking about several of the topics that you mentioned for the webinar today. I will caution everybody, though, I am not a good predictor of the future. If I was, I wouldn't be speaking with you. I'd be picking lottery numbers. But, you know, it's fascinating when you look at the world of arc-rated flame-resistant materials and apparel. And here at the Utility Expo, there are a couple of themes that I think are almost universal. One, if you need to be in arc-rated flame-resistant workwear, number one theme, I think, if you polled everybody, is people are always looking for lighter weight materials, more comfortable materials that our customers like Bulwark can produce, and basically blurring the lines between what you wear at work and what you would wear any other day of the week, whether you're at the golf course, whether you're in the office. So a lot of trends that we see are people asking, how can you make a fabric that's lighter and offers greater protection? So that, you know, this is one market segment. You know, we're talking to utilities, linemen, but that's also holds true for people like Derek mentioned earlier in his presentation in the oil and gas sector, folks that are working in chemical processing utilities or processing facilities. So, you know, the one theme I'm coming away from today at this show, and it's been happening for a while now, is lighter weight, more comfortable, and better protection garments. The other topic that you mentioned, Rick, was the addition or adoption of arc-rated flame-resistant fabrics in the public safety here. And I think one area that has developed as a result of the pandemic that's opened up some opportunities for customers is the stopping or people trying to emphasize that you need to stop sharing your PPE. You know, in years past, it was pretty common to have people share coveralls or share their 40 cal suits. Well, with the global pandemic, let's face it, I don't want to be wearing a uniform that my coworker had on when he was, you know, working on third shift. So companies are now looking to bring in specific PPE for the individual and the sharing of arc-rated flame-resistant garments. So that's a very positive thing. And even looking at, you know, this last year in North America with a lot of civil unrest, we have seen police departments look for daily uniforms that offer the police protection from some things that you can't predict. You know, it's unfortunate that the police officers will be in part of a demonstration. They may have a Molotov cocktail thrown their way. So they're looking for added and enhanced protection. And to Derek's point too, let's talk about what the firefighters are wearing under their bunker gear. There have been numerous incidents where teams have been pinned in burning buildings, and they have their bunker gear on. They're doing everything properly, and then all of a sudden they get pinned, and what they're wearing underneath that bunker gear can pose a hazard. And like Derek said, you're basically, if you're wearing Nike Dry Fit or Under Armour, you're going to have that material potentially melt to your skin. So a lot of interesting things that are going on right now. We're happy to be a part of offering solutions to customers that make garments from our fabric. So with that, I think I've exhausted my 10 minutes, but again, wanted to thank you and the committee for having us, and looking forward to some questions later on.
Excellent. Thanks, Rich. And thanks for joining while you're at a trade show. I know that's always tricky, and glad that you could come on and offer some thoughts. And certainly the styling is, is going to be, a factor, and especially when we get into law enforcement. So thrilled to have HB Protective Wear with us today, who is solely representing the entirety of Europe on our session today, the only non-North American operator. We have Sven Holst with us today, who is the Chief Operating Officer, the COO for HB Protective Wear. Sven, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Rick, for introducing, and thanks for the NAUMD and Klopman for having us this afternoon. Good afternoon from Germany. It's a bit later than in the States here right now. And I'd like to tell you something about the German point of view to the topics that have been raised. But I'd like to start, I guess not everybody knows HB Protective Wear, and I'd like to start with a very short introduction. So the company has been founded in 1952 by Mr. Berthold, and he has been a textile engineer, and he started with selling FR fabrics to manufacturers, and a few years later he decided to produce FR garments on his own. So, and 2015, let's skip some of the points. In 2015, there was the takeover of well-known brand Tampax, and they have been a manufacturer for aluminized garments and cold store garments. And because we became more international with that brand, we decided to change our company name from HB HB Schutzbekleidung to HB Protective Wear. So nowadays we are the market leader for PPE garments in Germany, and the turtle is our trademark, and that is why we think that the shell of the turtle is the most personal protective equipment that you can imagine. So we have production facilities all over Eastern Europe, and of course we have a small production still in Germany. We have 9 production plants in Eastern Europe. So our customers are 60% are textile rental companies and laundries, 30% are distributors and retailers, and 10% are end users. And our market is 70% is German and 30% international. So, and our product range is 60% bespoke garments. So we grow with the producing bespoke garments for our end user customers and also for textile rental companies and distributors. So these are some of our European customers. Our product range is nowadays very wide. So we all started with heat flame and splashes. That means garments that protect against heat and flame, welding garments. And nowadays arc flash protection, I think, is the most important part of our product range. But we are still also one of the last manufacturers of a real chemical protection garment. And of course, we do have high-vis and weather, always in combination with our FR properties. And we have cold protection garments, cold store garments, and not PPE, but it's also very important for us as ESD garments and clean room garments. Let's start with the topics that have been raised from Rick. So the change from treated cotton through Aramids to the plants was driven, in my opinion, from when we start from the treated cotton. So that was former has been the problem, the poor color fastness and washability of those fabrics and garments. And people thought there would be a higher reliability of inherent FR fibers versus the former proben treated products. And then there came an increasing demand for lighter weight fabrics. So and after the Aramids have become more popular, then we had to switch to the FR plants. And that was because we think because the increasing demand for high-risk garments with FR properties. And of course, people thought that Aramid garments and fabrics are, maybe too expensive. And then we came to the FR brands that are a bit cheaper. So the customer expectations today in up-to-date PPE garments are, of course, there has been a good level of protection. They expect a functional and modern design, perfect wearing experience, longevity of the products, of course, and washability in industrial laundries. And of course, nowadays there is sustainability. What we have in Germany, and I think that's also all over Europe, we have a rising popularity of multi-risk products over the last 10 years. And that became because these are usually lightweight garments. They have innovative combinations of various protection skills. We have a wide range of application. So for complex and changing workplaces, like, for example, when you have workers of service companies. And we have nowadays more and more workplaces with various hazards. And it seems to be the one solution that fits all. And it's also easier to sell. So, but multifunctionality also means, in our opinion, that not all the protective properties are really needed from all customers. And that means we have higher purchasing and servicing costs. Of course, it's not really sustainable. For example, when you talk about FC, fluorocarbon finish. And in our opinion, this is also always the lowest common denominator in regard to the level of protection. And increasing this level of protection means, again, higher fabric weights, double layers, or we have to combine different PPE garments. So, and this is all a big challenge in regard to the comfort and the breathability and the moisture management. So, combining those many fibers, nowadays we have fabrics with 5 or more different fiber types. And this is a problem when we talk about recyclability of garments. So the development of the AR and FR markets in Germany and Europe will be driven by a fast growing energy industry. So we talk about energy suppliers and grid operators. We have changing industry through the energy transition when we look at the automotive industry and oil and gas industry. We have an increasing in complexity in many jobs combining various hazards. And it sounds strange, but this is still a fact that we still have missing the right PPE garments at many workplaces. So overall, we think that there is a real growing market with higher and complex requirements for the future. So the challenges for the future will be that there, at least in Germany, there is a growing importance of sustainability. And there is also a increasing demand for PPE fabrics made from organic and recycled fibers. Up to now, this is not really relevant for the PPE sector, but I'm really sure that this will become more and more relevant. Then we will have a ban of chemicals from the supply chain. So when we look at REACH, this can cause some problems. We have an increasing importance of the textile services, textile rental companies, and the need of recycling of fabrics and garments will be more and more relevant. And of course, we have the change of the weather conditions that has been mentioned before by Derek. So it's getting hotter in Europe and all over the world, and this will have an impact on the garments. So coming back to the recyclability, so the limiting factors for recycling of PPE fabrics and garments are that we have, I mentioned that, the combination of too many different fiber types And this is really the problem when you want to recycle a fabric or a garment. The use of chemicals for the production or finishing of the fibers and the fabrics and the garments, and the contamination of the garments and the end of life. So these are, I think, 3 key points that has to be solved in the future. So the future for AR and FR garments are solutions with a clear focus on what is really needed. And I'm talking about the kind of protection versus the multi-risk, multi-standard products. We believe in high level of performance will be more and more important. High wear comfort, of course, and also with the background of the heat problem, changing weather conditions, longevity and washability of products, sustainability, again, organic fibers, recycled fibers will be more relevant, and the recycling of the garments at the end of life. Yeah, many thanks.
That was excellent. That was a really good summary, Sven, of what's going on. And I have questions based on some of the things you were saying for our North American panelists, curious what the nuanced differences are. Thank you so much. So having saved the best for last, I'm very pleased to introduce from Lion, Karen, lost my screen there for a second, Karen Latonen, and Karen is the VP of Innovation and Product Development. Karen, thank you so much for taking the time and for talking to us today.
Great, thanks, Rick. I appreciate NAUMD having us. So I'm very happy to be part of this esteemed panel and bringing up the rear. I don't know about saving best for last, but I'm definitely bringing up the rear. So, as introduced, I'm the Vice President of Innovation and Product Development, which means I do such things, create new products and help bring them to the market. I am a member on several NFPA technical committees, including the Emergency Services Work Apparel, which, as we all know it and love it, is station wear. And I'm also the current chair of the Astm F1506 Protective Clothing Committee. I too wanted to spend a couple minutes talking about standards updates. And one of the things in terms of the NFPA 1975 standard related to station wear is that NFPA is undergoing what they're calling this ERRS, or Emergency Response and Responder Safety Standards Reorganization. And part of this project, they are consolidating several standards into one standard, creating basically bigger books based on work hazards. So they're taking many of their standards. The transition started in 2020 and continues through 2025. But why this is important to this group at this point is in the next, sorry about that, I'm gonna go to my next slide. In the next year, the NFPA 1975 station work uniform standard is going to be one of the documents that becomes part of the consolidation program. So that is going to be consolidated into a new standard called NFPA 1970. And as part of this book, it's going to include structural and proximity firefighting ensembles, so your turnout gear, the station work uniforms, the self-contained breathing apparatus, and the personal alert safety system. So basically everything you need to wear into a structural fire is going to be in this book. The intent is to make it a little bit easier for end users who are going into those hazards, make it a little bit easier for them to just go to one place to locate what are all their needs. I will say that this isn't going to be a combination of requirements. The individual standards are still going to be maintained within this book, at least for the first go around. We never know what the future holds with NFPA, but at least in this book, it's each individual component. But I think it's setting the stage. I know Derek mentioned this in his talk about systems level protection. I think it starts to set that stage for the future that, maybe we can start looking at these things as a system to offer more protection in the future to the firefighter instead of always assuming just the bare body beneath what you're wearing. So for the standard, the public input is currently open, and with NFPA, public input is just that. Anybody can submit input to the standard if there's something you'd like to see changed from design, performance, labeling. You can do that until November 10th. At that point, the committee gets together and reviews all those public comments or public inputs, and every one of those inputs needs to be addressed by the committee. Sometimes portions of are added. Sometimes nothing is added, but sometimes they proceed with the idea or take it and run with it even farther. So that should be done about the middle of 2022. And then at that point, the standard opens up for public comment on the new draft. And then that gets worked on in late 2022. So all that work that happens in 2022 would be published in the standard in 2023, and it'll have a 2024 edition date on it. So, some of the things that the committee is intending to review, as always, you review your existing requirements and see where maybe new things can be incorporated are the thermal stability in the base requirements of station uniforms, and then some of the optional requirements, including the optional flame resistance, water resistance, and then insect repellency. So if you want to make your voice heard on some of these areas, please go to the NFPA website and submit a public input. So getting to some of the questions that were posed to all of us, and really my co-presenters here have all done a really good job already covering most of these topics, and I'm probably going to be just repeating a lot of what they've already said. But I mean, in terms of an end user community, kind of the two biggest things you hear about is comfort, which we've heard a lot about from everyone already, and potential ways that comfort can be addressed. And then affordability. As we all know, budgets continue to get tighter, especially when we're dealing with municipalities and even in some of the larger corporations. Budgets are slimmer. Available dollars are slimmer. So we need to make sure we're keeping in mind affordability. And then, addressing comfort. Aramids have been the longstanding workhorse in the FR world. But over the last 60 years, there's been many improvements made in their comfort, whether it's yarn construction, fabric construction, and then of course into the blending with other fibers to get the desired characteristics, which, as Sven pointed out, brings in other challenges as we try to move to a more sustainable world and the challenges that brings here. But there are really, a lot of things that can be done as we look at development. And I think both Derek and Rich hit it on the head is, making sure people understand that, lighter doesn't always mean more comfortable or more protective, that, you really need to start thinking about what is your need, and maybe not try to get one magic bullet that does everything. In terms of maybe what's trending in garments, a big challenge we face is a little bit of that balance that was talked about earlier, and that's trying to get some modern styling while maintaining tradition. You really need to balance those style trends with the tradition of the job that, especially in my business, that we're trying to accomplish, and the objective of a uniform. Uniforms are typically, especially in the fire service, designed to make you stand out, that you are, someone that can help or in an authority position. So being able to balance some of those designs around that is sometimes a challenge versus some of the younger generations say, no, I want something to match what's closer to my everyday home life apparel. You got to be able to strike that balance. And then, working on garment designs to increase the comfort and the freedom of movement for the type of work being done. If you're in a high dexterity position, whether it's a shirt, pant, gloves. You need to be making sure that you're producing a garment that allows the worker to be able to have the type of flexibility or dexterity or comfort to be able to do their job. I mean, we all know, even just you buy a new pair of shoes in our own lives, and if until they're broken in, they're not comfortable. And if your feet hurt or your shirt's too tight, you're not happy until you don't want your clothing fighting against you in the work that you're doing. So being able to address that in terms of design is very important as well. And then assessing the identity needs while still maintaining the thermal protection. I think we've all seen it. The number of times somebody buys an FR garment and then decides they want to put some identity or embellishment onto their garment and slaps a patch on it that will burn faster than toasting a marshmallow over an open fire. So you're fighting that. Here you just went the extra mile to have FR protection in your garments, but you've now just added something that'll flare up in case of an exposure. So it's some of those things, while making sure it's every little piece. It's not just the garment. It's your entire assembly. So and that goes for us in the station work uniform. It goes for us in the wildland market, and as well into some of the technical rescue garments where you have customers who are opting to have their technical rescue with some flash fire for potentially extrication situations and hazards that they have. So those are definitely some of the areas that we see is trending and changing and needs as we go forward. And that's really the end of my slide show here. I usually am told I'm the one that can get us back on time. So hopefully, even though I went through that pretty quickly, that I got us back here with a few minutes for questions still, because I think there's probably some that have come in over the course of all of our discussions. So thank you again. And thank you to everybody who took the time out of their day to come and listen to this group as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Karen. That was really interesting. So I'm going to tag everyone here in the chat and say, ask any questions you have, just to remind everyone that in the chat. But there were a few themes, there were many common themes. One of them in particular that, Karen was talking about, that we're going to end up with this booklet, right? That will go, far in educating us all on what's out there, what's available, what the definitions are. That dovetails interestingly with a question that someone put in the chat relative to some very specific information about what's going on a product label related to, ARC rating, ASTM testing and all of that. I wonder if any of the panelists could speak on that, like, we can't deliver everything on a label. There's so much that this panel of people have to consider in these garments. We can't possibly put all this information on one label. Are there thoughts about how we can improve the end user education in efficient ways?
Yeah, I can take that as well. And that was part of, I mentioned in the 2020 edition of F1506, there was this new section added on conformity assessment, and that did include some new specific language that needed to be included on the labels. And you're exactly right, Rick. What that, it really touches on the need for end user education on that. And that's one thing that we've done, through other webinars as well that we offer here at Arcware is offer that education. There are plenty of garments out there that are mislabeled. They're not really, they're not adequately tested, either initially or with the ongoing testing, the lot testing that's required for F1506. Most do it very well, but there are some that aren't. And the first place you can see that is in the label. The reputable manufacturers that are doing the right things are keeping up with these standards and are labeling them properly. They know about the updates that are required, the specific language that's there. So we always try to educate end users on what to look for in the label, what must be there. And if it's not, raise the red flag, ask the manufacturer. Sometimes it's it's an honest mistake, it's missing, it just hasn't been updated. But sometimes that will be the first sign of someone trying to pull the wool a little bit. So absolutely, labeling is important.
Early in the regulation of the pharmaceutical industry, when you would want to run an ad in a magazine, you had to have an equal amount. You had to buy the second page ad in order to run all of the fine print and explain exactly what the drug does. It occurs to me that perhaps in the garment construction, we're literally going to need a panel, not just a label. We're going to need a panel inside the garment,
Sure.
to really walk through everything. And then somebody else asked here about the cotton garment. Is it possible, is anyone working on the ability for it to be both FR and water repellent? And Sven touched on the multi-risk demand. I want to play devil's advocate though and say, well, as an end user, yeah, I've got multiple risks. Why are you all going to make me buy 3 garments or have 3 layers for the 3 different things that I'm worried about when I'm climbing up that utility pole or I'm walking into, into the wetlands or whatever. So who wants to take that one about the cotton garment featuring both FR and water repellency as an example of a multi-risk, multi-performance function? Anyone? No one? Is Glenn Raven coming up with anything?
I can try to answer that. So I think
Right,
this
Sven.
is technically very, very hard to solve this problem, to have a 100% cotton garment, really water resistant or water repellent, and only by fluorocarbon. And we also have to keep in mind that we have a discussion, at least in Europe, with the C6 and C8 fluorocarbon, and this makes things a little bit more challenged than it has been before. So weather protection will be okay with C6 chemistry, but I think it's a long way to make a 100% cotton garment of fabric, 100 water resistant, 100%. I don't know how this would work.
You're also
Rick,
asking,
this is
sorry, you're also asking old technology to do a lot. I mean, if you're requiring it to be FR and AR, there's not much room left in that fabric to start adopting additional finishes, regardless of what they are. And then you've also got to balance it with, there are other fabrics and other barriers and other laminates that do a far better job for what you're asking for too. So you're going to design something that is using older technology to solve a problem when there's maybe better, lighter, more sophisticated solutions. I mean, you look at our friends at Gore, who do great stuff with barriers and that kind of thing. So I would, as a consultant, from a consulting standpoint, I'd ask why you would want that, and then maybe direct them to something that is a better solution.
Blends are your friend.
and I apologize, guys. I was struggling to find the unmute button, but as a company, Glen Raven does not utilize natural fibers in our constructions. So we blend Aramids with monocrylics, and we do produce arc-rated flame-resistant fabrics that have different levels of water repellency. To Sven's point, the challenge now is with the C6, C8 chemistry, balancing the degree of water repellency you need to achieve, also with the effectiveness of that water repellent treatment. And then you're also balancing that with the arc flash and flash fire standards. So is it possible? Yes. Is it being done today? Yes. But we have to understand as the producer what the ultimate end goal is in terms of levels of effectiveness. And then to Derek's point, ways to incorporate water repellency and performance look at the Gores, the type of systems that they have out there that are just phenomenal in terms of what it will do for the wearer, even in the arc-rated flame resistant category as well.
Excellent. So we have two questions that are kind of related. There's a, wondering about other industries end up with FR chemicals in the, bad column, and the avoid please. And then we have someone else asking if there is hope that there could be choices beyond formaldehyde to to generate the FR treatment. So anyone want to talk about trends in upcoming chemicals?
I think from what we're seeing, and understand that we get approached all the time with the latest and greatest and what those fabric solutions can bring to bear on our product line. And we're actually seeing it probably trending the other way, moving more to call it a synthetic combination of, as opposed to natural fibers, which would then take you out of the FR engineering necessary to make a cellulosic flame resistant, and going into a fiber combination that lends itself to updating the technology. I mean, the great thing about the marketplace is it pushes us to get away from PFAS to get to PFAS-free finishes. It gets us away from other finishes and looking to incorporate them in the fiber matrix so that that functionality becomes a byproduct of the actual fabric. Looking at things like moisture wicking, because most finishes, especially on FR garments, are going to have a limited life, usually 25 launderings. Some may be a little bit more, some may be a little bit less. So it's more advantageous to actually work at the fiber level to put those enhancements in. So it's a long-winded way of saying that we are trying. I mean, we are looking. There is no perfect fiber, no perfect fabric, no perfect solution across all these questions that I'm seeing. If I could give you antimicrobial, water wicking, finishing, changes color from hot to cold days, all these glorious things that we see sometimes on the retail side, understand that retail is probably about 3 to 5 years ahead of us, because it takes us that long to, okay, we've got a concept. Now we have to go to Brian and we have to go through all this testing. And when you look at conformity and all those things, all that was added because there's bad actors out there. So these bad actors have caused this additional, regulation, causing additional, cost to these things, but we still have to adhere to all that, because I want to communicate to you at the end of the day that if you adorn my garment for your working day, that you're going to ultimately be safe, not from also like what's externally, but what you're putting on your back. So there's about a 3 to 5 year progression to produce, quote unquote, something new. When I produced IQ in 2014, that took us 5 years in development to get a polyester inner lining to the point to where the marketplace would adopt it and was part of the FR solutions. So I say all that. We hear you. We're doing all these things. It's in development somewhere. And when it can come to it, trust me, we want to get it because we know people will want it and ultimately people will buy it. But there's a lot of steps to get it to retail along the way.
Yes, and not only do we want all of that in one package, right? A multivitamin, if you will. But we also, as another listener is pointing out, we want two-tone styling, and we want reinforced, elbows and knees and seams, and we want lighter and breathable and affordable, oh, and don't forget, we want 10 pockets, just like the tactical uniforms, out there are producing as well. And of course, now we have to, factor in interlinings and all sorts of other fun construction things that this team of panelists have to deal with on a regular basis of thinking about. Other questions or other thoughts? Anyone else want to respond to any questions that have already been asked? Any thoughts about the struggle between brand name and a consistent language that simply defines the categories that we've been discussing. I'm, personally a fan of what Derek was talking about, that if we had a much simpler language that sort of described it all, and that led our marketing efforts, but that's going to be probably very difficult, right? Maybe just as the consumer world, we're 3 to 5 years behind in being able to do that as well. Any final thoughts on that? Nomex versus Aramid, very hard education, very hard to get customers to understand, right? So that kind of goes, along with what we're saying, that, education. Well, hopefully webinars like this. Yes, Karen, go ahead.
Yep, I say education is always the hardest thing, and it always takes the most time, especially when, you have a lot of people out there who believe everything they read on the internet. So they're educated on incorrect and correct information. So
yeah.
But I agree with you that it's webinars like these and people like this group of panelists that you've brought together here. That's part of all of our jobs, I believe, is to also educate as well as solve these technical issues that everyone's bringing up, and produce the bling, like the pockets and the trims and the multicolor.
Right.
Aaron, well said. Panel, it's been a pleasure. I got to jump off because guess what? Back-to-back Zoom meetings.
Okay.
So hey, I'm privileged at doing this with you all, and everybody in the audience. Thank you for showing up. Greatly appreciated. Enjoyed it very much.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah.
We'll take a opportunity. There were a couple that didn't come in the chat. They came in the Q&A that I think we can probably answer fairly quickly. There was one about size of patches that were required to be FR. And really the answer there is it depends on the standard. So Astm F1506 doesn't expressly require anything in the body, but it does have some language in the appendix of it recommending that anything non-FR be limited to 16 square inches individually and no more than 40 square inches in total. When you go to NFPA 2112, it's going to look for much smaller. It requires anything greater than 4 square inches then has to comply with the requirements. So it really just depends on the standard that those emblems are going into. But that's a question we get asked all the time, and what the impact of non-FR logos are. And as the answer usually is, the answer to that question is it depends.
Yeah, thank you for noticing the Q&A chats. So that's a good point about the patches. Someone else is asking a question as to why North America, and probably the US in particular, is behind Europe on sustainability. If you have watched the news the past 5 years, we've had a bit of a struggle here in the US between our political parties and everything slowing down. There was a lot that didn't happen in the environmental sustainability world. I believe that privately companies have continued very strong efforts to work on being sustainable, working on lots of circularity projects from a product's birth until its death certificate. So I think that it just hasn't been as publicly noted. And I think I would agree with the questioner that the U.S. is behind on, on stating our goals in that direction. So I hope we can catch up. We do appreciate Europe's leadership in many areas, and likely sustainability has been one of them. If someone wants to add to that thought, or let me just provide that political answer, that's okay too.
Well, there is, it's worth mentioning that there are efforts in both AATCC and ASTM to address sustainability in textiles. That doesn't say that the industry is or isn't responding to it, but there are efforts in both of those standards development organizations to if nothing else, raise awareness and to create some, some guidelines at least on improving sustainability in textiles. And that's in general, not just protective clothing. That's in textile industries in general.
Yeah, agreed. All right, I want to be respectful of everyone's time, and thank you all so much again for participating. We did record this webinar. We will post it on the naumd.com/webinar/recordings. It's also all of the recordings are on our YouTube channel. So look for this to be posted in the next 24 hours. If anyone has any questions, they can email rick.levine@naumd.com or just go to naumd.com and fill out our contact form or use that. And I can put you in contact with any of our panelists and or answer any further questions that may come up as a result of watching this webinar online if you're catching it that way. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great day and week.